everyone. I'm Pallavi Sankhe, and I'm excited to present DEI Manch September edition featuring Emmeline Barnes.
Hi.
Hi, Emmeline. Emmeline is the founder of Untangling Minds and an IB International School counselor. She helps families and educators embrace neurodivergent traits as strengths. As a neurodivergent psychotherapist with ADHD, dyspraxia, dyslexia, and autism, she brings humor, compassion, and heart to empower individuals and their lives. So, hey there, Emmeline.
Hi. I'm well. Thank you for having me and that lovely introduction.
It's been great knowing you, Emmeline, and I really would like everyone to have a glimpse into the neurodivergent world. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So to start off, maybe you could start with explaining what is neurodiversity. We've been hearing these terms as a part of DIB, and if you could just shed some light on this particular term, neurodiversity, that would be great.
Yeah, of course. So neurodiversity basically celebrates the infinite number of different kinds of brains everybody has, It's the different ways that everybody thinks, perceives, and thinks about the world and processes the world. And it's Judy Singer, this lady here, that coined the term in 1990. So actually it's not that old. I think what she's saying is basically we are all variants of humans, we have different shaped legs, body shape, eye color. And she's also saying, and let's extend that to our brains, we all have different shaped brains that work in different ways. But what she coined was that some brains are neurotypical. That's like most brains that fall into that neurotypical camp. And that's the majority of the way humans perceive the world. But then there's also I call neurodivergent neurodistinct. There's a distinct number of people that have neurodivergent brains, and they have a not difficult, but a different way of learning and process. It's only difficult because it's different from the neurotypical world. So yeah, and I describe myself as neurodivergent or neurodistinct. I think, perceive, learn distinctly differently from others. And when you think about neurodivergent people or folk, you could have people who could have diagnoses, and maybe they self-diagnose themselves or identify, we would say. So for me, I identify as autistic, which means I can tell you I identify as autistic, I have ADHD, I am dyslexic and dyspraxic. So I really do see the world in a different way. And each of those types of learning or perceiving the world throw up different presentations for different people. So I couldn't tell you, I wouldn't like to tell you a general term for each of those ideas of learning, but I could tell you how they present in me, if you'd like, if that would be helpful.
That will be great. I mean, in fact, yeah. What a wonderful way of presenting neurodiversity.
So for me,
yeah.
I gave you a whole list of terms that have been applied.
You did. Yeah.
Stages of my life as well.
If you could just, there's some difficult terms like ADHD and dyspraxia and dyslexia and autism. If you could shed some light on these particular terms.
Yes, sure. I'll tell you.
Familiar with them. Yeah.
So with autism, it's a way of looking at the world, and I would say my autistic side, I find social cues quite different. I don't always read social cues. I see things in a very obvious way. I don't do subtleties very often. I have some extra sensitivities. I'm a little bit more sensitive to light, to noise. Generally, I'm more sensitive. I feel more. I taste more. There's all my senses are influenced by this style of learning. So that, if you think about that really edges the way that I have human interactions, because It also gives me, I can't assume anything. I'm always seeking to understand what's going on, because the world doesn't come natural to me like a neurotypical brain, you know. So what you might take for granted, I always see with fresh eyes and have to rethink. And that often leads me to dig deeper and learn more, actually. So it's good. But out of all my presentations, my loudest one, I think, is my ADHD. And that's the one that gives me the hyperactivity. It gives me that impulsive edge, which is probably a little bit towards why I've lived in so many countries and made these decisions, because I just go for it. You know, and it balances well with the autism, thinking deeply and then just going for it. So it's a good balance for me. But it does mean that I do get overwhelmed with everyday tasks. So I really appreciate living in India because I have help at home. Before, when I was living in the UK and other European countries, and I did it all myself, I did become very overwhelmed, because the other part of my it's going on, isn't it? Because I have so much to say, is the dyspraxia. And the dyspraxia is normally associated with the way you move. So the way that I move, way that my brain sells signals to the way I move. I mean, it's just that my brain has to work harder, so I can get it, like I can get like exhausted emotionally from moving fast, or having a pace of a day, or planning things. My executive functioning is affected. So that's interesting, because I could go on a really, really long run and my body was going because of my ADHD and my hyperactivity, but emotionally I would be drained. Whereas probably for other people, it's the other way around, you know, for our new typical friends. And they're dyslexia. So that really does impact the way I read and I write. And I love AI now. I love speech to text. I love podcasts. I love, you know, just having so much more now at my fingertips that can type for me. So actually that part, as I move into an adult, or into an older adult, that's been great for me. So that's not really, I would say, an impairment.
Yeah, but technology has been a boon.
Yeah, and I just think being dyslexic, it does mean you read slowly. You can read. So again, you know, I'm reading slowly, so I go over the same thing again and again. So I'm likely to read less, but go deeper. I'd never skim read.
Understand it more deeply.
Yes, I think.
And maybe get more from it, rather than, you know, what. In fact, I am guilty of speed reading, so
Yeah.
and skimming and really going fast over the text. I'm afraid I do these things a number of times, and then now that you're putting it, I understand, you know, how different it is, and why I should not actually be doing it.
Although I would argue you should be, because that's why we'd work as a team, because you would get the breadth of knowledge if we were researchers together, and I would get the depth, and we would have very different perspectives on the same research. You see, so it's
we make a great team.
Yeah. We need to be interdependent and not, and there is that tendency, isn't it? Oh, I want to try that way, or I want to try that way. But actually, we should just celebrate in what we do well and find a partner to complement us, you know, with our learning styles.
That was a wonderful way of putting things, you know. It is so much better than just reading the definition and going through it like, acha, oh, this is so, oh, this is it. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay. Now you know. Let me go to the next question. Now that I have understood, and I hope our audience has also understood what it is. Could you, Emily, share your personal journey with neurodiversity? How has it influenced your work in psychotherapy? And what key lessons help you support neurodivergent people at school and work?
Oh my goodness, that's a big question.
That's a rather long question. So can I divide it into two parts? Let me focus. Let us focus on the first question, which is like, you could tell us about your actual personal journey. You actually already started, but we would like to know a little bit more about your personal journey and how it has influenced your psychotherapy.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I start back to my school days, you know, I always loved to learn, but none of the learning I was doing, I could present in a way that could be measured, like in an examination way. So when I left school, I had very few qualifications yet. And I used to look at other people and I think, how come they have more qualifications? Because I've worked hard, I've learned, yet my way of learning is not recognized. And it really, really puzzled me. And I also look at the autistic part of me that I didn't know then as well. I also used to not just do academic learning, but in my head, I was social emotionally learning all the time. I was thinking, I mean, I used to have a lot of friends, but I never chose them. You know, suddenly I'd be beside someone and they would say, "Oh, I'm your friend." And I was thinking, how did that happen? I didn't really understand how I got friends. So all the time I was fascinated and I'd watch people, study people. How do they make friends and how do they turn take? And why do they say that if they don't mean that? So all the time, even though I had no qualifications, I kind of left school with a very different kind of knowledge. And that fascination made me think, well, what are schools? What are they doing? How do people learn? So I started studying by myself. And then bit by bit, through going to adult education and part-time courses and working alongside in settings such as supermarkets and deliveries and all sorts of different jobs. I did apple picking, all lots and lots of different jobs. I studied part-time, a bit here, a bit there, went abroad, come back. In special education, because I really wanted to understand how people learned. And that's when I discovered, oh, I'm dyslexic. And I also discovered, oh, the dyslexia, you know, soon after that as well, because people had always told me I was clumsy. And that was another thing I was studying. How do people move from one space to another without knocking themselves? Now, I've since learned to negotiate space, but the effort it takes, you know, as I said,
especially in India, and I believe you lived in Singapore, right? So
I
Asian.
stayed in Singapore, but I didn't live there. But yeah.
Okay, so essentially, like all these Asian countries, there's too much population, and for a dyspraxic person to navigate those spaces would be quite difficult, right?
Well, kind of, yes and no, because when I was in Germany, there were very set paths to walk on and set lines and channels you had to walk on, even because they have cycle paths and paths. And I would just veer in and veer out, and people would hoot on their horns or they would shout out to direct me into the right path. Whereas here in India, you know, it's really appealing to the ADHD, problem solving, in, out, you know, there's no real way, there's no way I have to go. I just have to find a way. So actually, it's so interesting, isn't it, that it actually appeals to me, the way of walking around India, a lot more up and down, in and out of pavements, round different marketplaces.
Not the easiest way.
It's not, but I think it keeps my interest going. It's never boring, is it?
It's never boring. It's never boring. In fact, the everyday commute can be as interesting as it gets. It all depends on your sense of fun
Yeah.
or your tiredness.
Yes,
Both.
it does. Yeah.
Both.
Yes.
especially in Mumbai, because every day, day in, day out, navigating same problems, it can get tiring
Oh,
sometimes.
yeah, absolutely. But yeah, that my hyperactivity overrides that for me.
Yes, ADHD helps.
And then I suppose I went into special education, and I specialized with young people with learning and behavior. They used to call it EBD. So they were young people whose behavior presented as so loud, and maybe they were always in conflict, but they couldn't remain in mainstream schools. So they would go to a behavior unit, and that's where I would be a teacher. And then I was really fascinated because I was thinking, well, how are they going to learn if they don't really understand how they process the world, or they're processing in an anxious way, or they can't self-regulate? So that's when I started to study psychotherapy, you know, and I studied it informally first, again, like I do, like I eclectically read this, do that, gather together, before I went on, whilst I was still teaching, and then becoming I did special education teaching. I later became Department of EBD schools. I was a principal for some time in Italy as well. And after that, I launched off which is very common for people with ADHD to have many different kinds of careers. So I launched off I went and got the proper qualifications, went back to the UK, studied, had my third son in the middle of it, and became a psychotherapist. And through that kind of study, I became more and more aware of my autism.
You had an impressive array of qualifications, number of countries that you've lived in. And then when you told me you had 3 sons in the midst of all this, I personally feel it is just amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Range is just amazing. And the fact that I am neurotypical, yeah, and I would find all this very daunting.
Yeah, but I wonder
Amazing, yeah.
if it's because you have a set of expectations for yourself. I was very free range, I
Yes.
had no mold to fit into.
Yes.
So I was able to express myself, because I didn't know another way. I couldn't fit in the other way.
Maybe also because we as an Asian society, as an Indian society, our parents also tend to set expectations from us. They have certain set of expectations. We are supposed to be round pegs and round holes, and we should not expect anything square or octagons or any other shape. So yeah, that.
Yeah.
But then I try to veer far away from this as a parent myself. But when we were younger, we were shaped by and large by our experiences, but of course by our parents. But that is how Asian societies are.
Yeah. And I think for me, because I was pigeonholed into special education when I was younger, the expectations for me were very low. I remember my career teacher at school saying, the cleverest people at this school go to work in the supermarket.
Okay.
So therefore I had a free range really, because anything I did, I could try and it would
Yes.
be seen as meeting my expectations. So I think in some ways, even though it wasn't helpful for my self-esteem at the time, I do see how it drove me. Well, I'll try this. I'm used to failing. If I fail, I fail, I'll try this, I'll try this. It gave me that freedom, to find my niche.
And made you a happier person.
Mm-hmm.
Shows.
Yeah. But it's interesting, only choosing things that impact my own life, if you see, at first, all the learning I did was to understand myself. And then the next step was to connect with the world. So it's a different way of learning. Yeah.
So moving on to the next question. Your personal journey was definitely super interesting. What do you think? What are the common challenges that neurodivergent people face in schools and workplaces?
Oh
And
God.
are there ways of overcoming these issues?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the common there's a lot of prejudice if you say you're neurodivergent.
Yes.
Often I'll rock up and say I'm autistic and people say you don't look autistic, or which is kind of like an insult, because it's what perceived idea do you have, and I think that's, you often get there's a very narrow view of how you need to be in the school and the workplace, and variants aren't often encouraged. We're more encouraged to stay in line, stay in our lane and learn.
Yes.
Because if you can and you're neurotypical, you will learn faster, won't you? It's like, you can imagine, like, you're learning faster and you're going in a developmental way that people understand. Whereas for a neurotypical person, you're a neurodistinct person, your learning is spiky. So think some things I really excel at, and some things I find really tricky and need more help with. And I think often with neurotypical workplaces and schools, they'll say like, well, she can do that. So they assume that I'm always going to be here. They don't assume that, that you have they're not sympathetic towards a spiky profile. They want everybody to be similar. And I think on the whole, workplaces that I've experienced have moved into not being interdependent. So if you have a job role in your school, if you're in a teaching or in a corporate world, if there are three of you, you have the same role, you have the same expectations, nobody looks at your way of learning or your personality and thinks, how can I get the best out of this worker? What is their profile like? So at the moment I work, as well as for Untangling Works, I work in an international school. I work with a beautiful team who allow me to have my ideas, to have my inspiration, to set up workshops, to do all of those kind of things. But I could not do it behind the scenes with them not doing my paperwork. They do organize my paperwork. I can tell them what to put, but they can do a spreadsheet and so we work interdependently. And that's what's allowed me to blossom in all the different places that I work, by working interdependently. And many of us get stuck in our job role and say things, it's not my job, or this person's doing more than another person, when actually we all do different things. So that's the first thing, the sameness. I think that is significant. I think as well, as you can hear, I like to talk. And sometimes I don't draw breath. And some people, there are certain expectations in the workplace to do with taking turns, the way you dress. And if you don't meet those exactly, people can be a little bit prejudiced. They can exclude you. I have experienced being bullied before, and a lot of my clients, my neurodivergent clients, are also bullied for being slightly different. It's just this thing where people don't seek to understand. They're not curious. It's more about, you're different, and to me that's slightly frightening. So I really, really understand. So a lot of my work is about helping our neurodivergent people understand how they learn, so they can advocate to others. Because if you don't know, you're not going to understand. But first of all, we have to get over that barrier of prejudice. That, of course, you must, the example I gave first of all about, we worked in a team and research would be great, because we have such different perspectives. So it makes a much more colourful place. It makes you, having neurodivergent people in your workplace is harder work, because you're having to question a lot of why am I doing this practice? Not because it's done for you, and if you are, because I don't assume things, if you were talking about a certain practice, I would ask you more. I would seek to understand. And bizarrely, another prejudice or difficulty in the workplace is, quite often, if systems are set in place, people feel quite defensive if you ask them more. I've actually experienced that even in doctor surgeries. If I want to know more about something, it's like, I've studied, I'm the boss. So in that way, and then you get perceived as somebody that wants some conflict or aggravating, or which isn't true. You're just trying to understand. But those people that do open their hearts to that and do think, they have to think more deeply about their practice. They have more reflective practice, so it actually just raises everything to be more beautiful and cohesive. We just need to open those doors, don't we? And it's devastating if you aren't accepted, if you don't hear a voice. It does lead to mental health issues, it's terrible if you don't. We all deserve to meet our potential and to thrive in our work, school, home places. So you really need these open up, because if you don't do it, you're going to get a beautiful set of people who are going to be quite ill.
Yes, true.
And really not very kind. So there's a lot of kindness. I think sometimes in the workplace, they have wonderful procedures and policies put in place to ensure that minorities, including neurodivergent people, have a voice. But what often happens, they become barriers because people hide behind them. Or sometimes I speak to bosses, for example, in different organizations, who are scared. Well, how do I speak with my new neurodivergent person that's come in the team? Or they're a little bit scared, as if the neurodivergent person is from another species.
Just be normal.
When we're just humans to humans. And it's interesting, how would I know? I've not met that person, how would I know? You speak to everybody else. You seek to understand, you're kind, you're respectful,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think so. Yeah, I'm thinking, I mean, it is, and the lack of accommodations, I think if workplaces are too, if their hours are very, I mean, obviously some hours have to be in place, but if they're not at all flexible, or if they're not more, I love the idea of having well-being days when you're not necessarily sick, but you might be burnt out because, for me, I can have what I call an ADHD streak. If I'm doing a piece of research or a workshop, I can stay up for 3 days doing it.
Mm.
So the next day I need to rest. And I've clearly
Yeah.
done a lot more work than anybody else has done. But I'm
No,
still
also,
expected to come in and
yeah, but they would love that you are staying up late and you're doing the work of 3 people, but then they would want you to do it every day, day after day.
but if you featured on outcomes, you'd think, oh, I've achieved my outcome early, so I can have a rest. A lot of the people I speak to through my Untangling Minds, they talk about who work online. They say their bosses would die if they knew, because they literally do all their work on a Thursday. They do nothing on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they do everything and more and get committed to the amount of work they do on Thursday and Friday. But it's more difficult if you go in the building.
So that would be a spike day. So Thursday is a spike day. The
Yeah.
rest of it's all a sine wave. Why
Mm.
not? Mm.
So
Just
a lot of trust is needed, isn't it? If you're managing somebody.
I didn't know this, to be very honest. Yeah.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
so if you know if Emmeline, if you could share some strategies, or we could recommend some strategies to integrate neurodivergent employees smoothly into a team. Clearly, as I said, they or rather we would think of neurodivergent people as a different species, which is not true. So
Yeah, you do.
how,
And I think
how
people
do you
get
ease
mixed
the
up with the
integration?
law. Yeah,
Yeah,
the law as well. They're a bit worried in case they offend somebody
yeah.
or. So I think it's about, you have these policies and procedures now in most places, in most big workplaces, they do have inclusion policies and procedures, or they're in the midst of creating them. But it's about making them jump off the page, isn't it? Not just be a document in a drive no one can find, because that's often the thing. And it's about really looking at that, but also looking at the real people that are before you, and having, I think it's always about seeking to understand. It's about having curious questions rather than defensive questions, having and getting to know somebody rather than just putting them in the mold, saying, here is the mold, jump in, you've got to fit here. And in order to fit here, we know you're autistic, so here's some headphones and here's a dark corner. And, they don't, rather than say, well, actually, is this what you need? And do you actually have to work in exactly the same way? One of the things I love to do in Untangling Minds, and a few of the workshops I've done, is where I might meet with a management team. And all my workshops are experiential. So it's nothing about a PowerPoint. I mean, I might touch on what neurodivergence is a little bit like I did with you, but it would be more like a lived experience. So I would tell the boss the day before, you have to turn up to work tomorrow, and I will give them a role, what they have to be. So it'd be a role that they feel uncomfortable about, because that's what it's like. I don't work in a corporate place now, but if I did, I have to dress in clothes that aren't colorful, which really drain my energy, and I have to wear shoes that hurt, and all of these kind of things, and so I would also, and I have to go and be someone else. I have to tone down who I am. I can't turn up and be my authentic self. So I say this to the managing team. You see, you're going into work today, you have to be like this, dress like this. You don't, and you have a different name, maybe a name that you don't really want, or a different job that's beneath what you usually do, they might think beneath, because often autistic people don't reach their potential at work, so you ask them
Yes,
to do this.
absolutely.
You give them a whole set of tasks to do, but you don't tell them why, and you tell them how to do them in the neurodistinct way, and you say you have to do them the way I do them. And that might be no break, and you have to go straight through. Because for every what I'm just talking about, my presentations and my lived experience, but everybody who's neurodivergent is so, we're not the same. So I would, say, for me, with the manager, I would say, if they were going to reflect how I feel in the workplace, right? You see, because what happens to me, you might have been given a project to do, and then everyone says, go on a break. Now, if that happens to me and I go on a break, then I've left. I can't get back to it. So for me, it's better not to. So I would tell the manager, you have to finish this, and you have to just finish it. You have to stay, so they get the feel of what it's like to work, and to understand, actually, there are different ways of working. What bits bridge over? How can I get the best? How can I seek understanding, and have fun? I think sometimes we can be very, very serious. It is a serious business, but we know we learn through humor. When things are a bit light-hearted, we're more inclined to make a mistake. It breaks the ice a little bit, doesn't it? I love talking about my neurodivergence people. I love seeing people slightly embarrassed and awkward, because I've just opened the door. Because so many, you must have experienced it before, where you go to a meeting and they say, right, this is a safe space, and we're all going to be able to speak be our authentic self, and then I'm like, great, woo woo, and off I go, and I'm asked to leave. So it's like, well, what kind of authentic space is this? So I
That's a
like,
great way of putting things, Emily. In fact, I remember that when we spoke for the first time, there was so much warmth. And then when we spoke again, there was again so much warmth. And we opened up and we talked so much, and about so many different things. And we might, it might be oversharing, but then so what? We had a great time, right? Again, the barriers have to be broken down. Once you realize that the other side is just the same, there's no difference per se.
and I think that's also why I love working with young people, because they are knocking those barriers down. They are becoming more confident in their neurodivergent self, and they're allies. They're the people they're studying with. I like working in schools, their communities are embracing each other. And I think we have a very exciting future. There are a few dinosaurs like us, where people that don't want things to shift yet or aren't ready. But I know it's coming, and I know that there's change, and that's a very beautiful thing to be part of.
Yes.
And I'd love, like in the corporate world, to give you a 10-point plan. And it's like I've got all my books that I read about inclusion, and these books are really cool, and they've got some loads of strategies and ideas. But at the end of the day, it's about just connecting with another human being.
Exactly. Yeah. No amount of theory and no amount of policies is
throw them out the bin for a while. And I think you can't get to know someone unless you set up like a setting where you can make friends and connect, professional friends. I'm not saying you have to be, and I think, like in often corporate places, they have, I don't know, in the West, it's very much drinks in a loud pub. In India, it's very noisy food. And, for me, that's not the easiest place for me to communicate, to share. You have to have alternative. Can we have like a lunchtime picnic, or with a few people? We don't have to have everybody. You have to make these. I think you have to get your HR departments to think really carefully. How can we connect our workers together? That's not just one way or the highway. There's got to be lots of different pockets. Or, I love doing, like, I did painted some canvas bags with a group of colleagues once. That was a lovely way when I didn't know them. I did yoga with new colleagues once. A lovely way to get to know people, rather than the more traditional, loud, busy, dark, flashing is where I don't really get to connect. And I'm a little bit, would you believe it, but quite quiet in these spaces. So yeah, I think HR have a big part to play in creating settings for people to connect. And then I think from there,
HR is still learning. They are still grappling. They don't learn all these things at college or during their MBA. They are also humans, and I think it will take some time to be there. But the start is there. Definitely, things are happening. Things are moving towards the right place. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely. And I think if you've accepted people into your workplace who are neurodivergent, that means you must have some kind of interview process that is slightly more open, you know, because interviews are nightmares, you know, having to wear stickly clothes and answer questions directly and not knowing who you're going to meet and all of those things, you know. That's
how comfortable are you with it as such on a scale of 1 to 10, if you don't mind?
with interviews, with
yeah.
Well, it's really, really interesting. When I was younger, I hated it, and they would have get like a tenth of who I really was, and I wouldn't get the job. But now I just wade in and just say, look, I'm neurodivergent. Are you ready for me? You know, you're interviewing. Let's
Yes.
go. And you know, and some people aren't ready for me, so they say no. But
you take bull straight by the horn, and that's about it.
yeah.
Yes.
But I do realize, I mean, I mentor people to become more confident in who they are, because then you can thrive in your job and you can give so much more to your organization and your community rather than being in a box, you know, somewhere, just doing very little. It's very not nice for your self-esteem, and, you know, it filters out to your relationships, your family, you know, it's not good, is
I would love to continue and have this chat, but unfortunately we are running out of time. And it was, it was absolutely fabulous having you here. And I wish, maybe we can chat again and again and again. And I'm sure
I hope so.
we'll be doing. I'm pretty sure we will be doing that more often. And definitely, I would like to thank you for making it so easy for us to understand.
Oh, thank you for asking.
For people, for neurotypical people, or any people, or even people who are completely lay people, to understand what is neurodiversity, neurodivergence, and its importance for corporate world. And your insights really helped highlight how embracing diverse thinking can benefit everyone in the workplace. And your colorful way, and the phrases, the easy way of talking. I feel, companies can create more inclusive culture where everyone feels valued if they just ease into this rather than overthinking about it, right?
Absolutely.
So, Emmeline, thanks, and thanks again. It was wonderful having you here, and let's have many more such meetings.
I would really like that.
Yeah, and this will be the end of our session. But it was great.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Ta-da. Thanks. Bye.